Stop acting like this is your house, Mom. Rachel's voice was sharp, full of something colder than anger. I looked at her for a long moment, then placed the keys on the counter. It never stopped being my home until now, I said quietly. If you're listening, subscribe and tell me where you're from. My name is Evelyn Mercer, and I'm 68 years old. For most of my life, I worked as a high school principal in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I believed in order, patience, and fairness, 3 things that hold up a school, and I thought, a family. When my husband David passed away 5 years ago, the house we'd built together felt too quiet to live in. Every clock ticked louder, every meal for one stretched longer. My daughter Rachel insisted, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone. We've got plenty of space." I resisted at first. Parents never want to feel like a burden, but she said it with such conviction that I agreed. Their home sat at the edge of town, modern and bright, with a garden out back that Rachel tended like a second job. Her husband, Grant, was kind, the steady type who fixed things without being asked. Their 2 children, Lucy and Eli, were my daily joy. I arrived with only a few boxes, books, family photos, David's armchair, and a quiet promise to stay useful. That first year was gentle. Mornings began with Lucy at the breakfast table, hair tangled, asking, "Grandma, can you braid it like Mommy does?" Evenings ended with Eli climbing into my lap, pressing his head against my shoulder. Rachel would smile then, tired from work but grateful, or so I believed. I cooked, cleaned, folded laundry, even handled school pickups when Rachel's meetings ran late. It felt good to be needed. She'd thank me often, quick words said over the sink or between phone calls. But there were small moments when her tone shifted, when "thanks, Mom" sounded more like "I had it handled." I brushed it off, thinking stress was the culprit. After all, she was balancing a family, a career, a mortgage, everything I once did. Grant and I got along easily. He liked to talk about the yard, his latest project, or how much the kids had grown. One night, over dinner, he said, "You know, the kids are lucky to have you here. It keeps the house grounded." Rachel smiled faintly, but something in her eyes flickered pride mixed with discomfort. Later, she told me quietly, "You don't have to do everything, Mom. We're not kids anymore." I nodded, but in truth, helping was how I loved. By the second year, the rhythm began to change. Rachel's career took off. She traveled more, worked longer hours. I filled in without being asked. When she returned from trips, she'd notice subtle changes. The laundry system improved, spices alphabetized, bills organized by due date. "You really should relax more," she said once, half laughing, half serious. I told her I enjoyed it. "It feels like old times," I said. She didn't answer. Still, there were good days, family movie nights, Lucy's school play, Eli learning to read. I taught him how to sound out each word patiently, the same way I used to teach my students. Rachel would watch us from the doorway, expression unreadable. "He listens to you better than me," she said once. "He just knows my voice," I replied. She nodded but didn't smile. I thought everything was steady, maybe a little tight, but manageable. Then the comments began. "Mom, don't correct the kids in front of me. Mom, you don't need to wait up when we go out. Mom, I've got that handled." Each one small enough to dismiss. But together, they began to sound like a door slowly closing. Still, I told myself this was family, messy, layered, sometimes ungrateful but full of love underneath. I believed that if I stayed kind and patient, the balance would return. I was wrong. Sometimes, love isn't about staying, it's about knowing when. You've overstayed what was welcome. It started with something simple, the pantry. Rachel had always kept things organized, but after one long work trip, I decided to help by rearranging everything. I lined the shelves by type and color, labeled jars, and threw out what had expired. It looked beautiful, almost professional. When she came home, she stood in front of it, staring. "Where's the quinoa?" she asked flatly. "Top shelf," I said proudly. I grouped the grains together. She didn't thank me. She just sighed. "Mom, please don't move things around. I have a system." I smiled, trying to keep it light. "You mean had a system?" "Exactly," she said, shutting the pantry door. That moment seemed small, but it was the start of something larger. Over the next few weeks, every kindness I offered seemed to come with correction. If I folded laundry, she refolded it. If I cooked dinner, She adjusted the seasoning. I began to feel like a well-meaning guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Still, I said nothing. I've learned that silence often keeps the peace longer than explanation. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived with my name on it, a billing notice for an overdue water payment. I opened it, confused. The address was Rachel's, but the account name was mine. I hadn't seen that account since David passed. When Rachel came into the kitchen, I held it up. "Did you forget to change this over?" I asked. She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, right, I meant to handle that. I'll sort it out." "Why is it still under my name?" I asked gently. "Because that's how it was," she said. "Don't worry about it." Later that evening, I overheard her talking to Grant. "She keeps acting like everything here belongs to her," she said. "I just need some space," he answered softly. "She means well, Rach. She's trying." "I know," she said, lowering her voice. "But it feels like she's taking over again." That word again stayed with me. I wasn't taking over. I was holding on. To them. To belonging. To something that felt like family. The next day, I found a new piece of mail. A household policy form on the counter labeled Non-Resident Household Member, Evelyn Mercer. The phrase made my chest tighten. I wasn't a guest here. I'd helped pay for the down payment years ago, when Rachel and Grant were just starting out. David had insisted, "She's our daughter, Eve. Let's help her stand tall." I had agreed. Back then, Rachel called it our family home. Now, it was apparently only hers. That night, over dinner, I tried to bridge the gap. "I was thinking of repainting the guest room," I said. "It might make it brighter." Rachel's fork froze mid-air. "Mom," she said, her voice low, "you don't need to keep fixing things. It's fine the way it is. It's just paint," I replied softly. "No harm done." "It's not the paint," she said. "It's you always doing things without asking." The air turned sharp. Grant cleared his throat. "Maybe let's not do this now." "No, it's okay," I said. "She's right. I should have asked." "Mom, you always do this," Rachel said, louder now. "You treat this house like it's yours." The words hung there, heavy and bare. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "Habit, not authority." She pushed her plate back, stood up, and walked away. After that night, things changed quietly but decisively. My name disappeared from the mailbox label. My chair at the table was moved slightly to the side. Rachel began handling all the bills directly, saying it would simplify things. When I checked my phone one morning, I noticed I'd been removed from the family calendar app. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did not because of what it meant, but because of how seamlessly it was done. A week later, while organizing my paperwork, I realized my name had been taken off the utility account entirely. When I asked Rachel, she said, "Oh, right, the company needed one name, and Grant handles those things now. It's easier." "Easier for who?" I asked. "For everyone," she said briskly, ending the conversation. That night, I found myself sitting alone in the living room after everyone had gone to bed. The lights from the street lamp cut across the carpet in clean lines. I thought about how houses change, how one day, a door you built becomes the one that closes behind you. The next morning, I made tea and looked around the kitchen. The family photos on the wall were mostly new, taken after I'd moved in, yet I was in none of them. That realization landed like a quiet truth. I was living inside a story that no longer needed me in the frame. Still, I didn't argue. I just began writing things down, dates, small shifts, sentences that left marks. At first, I told myself it was habit, but deep down, I knew it was something else entirely. I was gathering evidence of when love quietly turned into permission. 2 days later, I went into town with a list of errands. On the way, I stopped by the county property office. I told the clerk I needed to confirm a title record, just routine, I said, the way widows often check old paperwork. She pulled up the file and asked for my ID. Then her expression softened in that careful way people get when they're about to deliver an awkward truth. "The property's under Rachel Horn and Grant Horn," she said. "It was refinanced last year." I blinked. "No mention of Evelyn Mercer?" She shook her head gently. "No, ma'am, not since the update. There was no fraud, no trickery, just quiet exclusion. The kind that doesn't make headlines but changes everything." "Could I get a certified copy of the title history?" I asked. "Of course." She printed it, stamped it twice, and slid it across the counter. I folded it into my purse and thanked her, my voice steady, though my pulse wasn't. Next, I went to the bank. Heritage Federal, the same branch David and I had used for 40 years. I asked to speak with a representative about a small savings account, the one I'd opened years ago for household support. When the young man pulled it up, he frowned. "It looks like this account's been linked to automatic payments for a utilities profile," he said. "Under the Horn household." I felt my stomach tighten. "And when was that change made?" "2 months ago," he said. "Online authorization." I leaned forward slightly. "I don't use online banking," I said. He looked uncomfortable. "Would you like me to print the change record?" "Please." He came back with 2 pages. There it was, my name listed under secondary contributor, Rachel's email as the contact. I asked if I could freeze that link. "Yes, ma'am," he said quickly. "Will require your personal approval from now on." When I left, the envelope with those papers felt heavier than it should. My second truth prop. On the way home, I stopped for groceries. In the checkout line, I caught my reflection in the freezer door. Calm, composed, the same woman who'd once handled entire schools of teenagers with a glance. Only this time, the defiance wasn't about control. It was about dignity. That night, while Rachel and Grant watched television, I sat in my room and opened a fresh notebook. I wrote in small, neat letters. June 2, property title changed, account linked, no discussion. I taped the receipt from the bank beside it. Every act of omission had become a fact of record. 2 days later, I visited the bank again. The manager, Mr. Jameson, an older man who'd known David and me for decades, recognized me immediately. "Evelyn, good to see you," he said warmly. "How's the family?" "Changing," I said. He smiled politely, not sure how to respond. I explained what I'd found: quiet, factual, without emotion. His expression darkened. "That's not right," he said. "We'll correct this. I'll flag your file so any future change requires in-person verification. No one can adjust your accounts but you." He stamped a form, signed it, and handed me a copy. "Keep this somewhere safe," he said. "It's your security record." Back home, I placed it between the pages of an old book, Pride and Prejudice. Fitting, I thought. Then I went about my evening as if nothing had changed. Dinner was quiet. Rachel asked about groceries, about the children's school forms. She didn't ask where I'd been. That night, I lay awake and listened to the faint hum of the dishwasher. I thought about how silence fills spaces differently once trust drains out. It doesn't echo, it absorbs. The next morning, I made breakfast for the children, kissed them goodbye, and walked to the park. I needed air and distance, but mostly perspective. I sat on a bench beneath a maple tree, opened my notebook, and reviewed my notes. Every entry told the same story: how control replaces gratitude when people mistake help for interference. I decided then that I needed to talk to someone who wasn't family, someone who could see this for what it was, without the weight of love or guilt. That's when I thought of Martha Kent, my oldest friend, who had spent her career helping families navigate complicated boundaries. She'd always said, "Evelyn, people cross lines when they don't realize you still draw them." That evening, I called her. "I need your advice," I said. "No drama, just facts." "I'm listening," she said. When I finished explaining, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It's time you took your life off autopilot, Eve. You've let them steer too long. Let's fix that." Martha arrived the next morning with her usual confidence navy blazer, hair clipped back, a folder tucked under her arm. We'd been friends for 40 years, from PTA meetings to widowhood, and she'd never once sugarcoated a truth. She hugged me lightly, then sat at the kitchen table. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine," I replied. "No, you're not," she said, opening her folder. "You're keeping records again. That's your tell." I smiled faintly. "You always knew." "I always know," she said. "So, let's talk about getting your independence back quietly." She laid out a checklist like it was a classroom lesson. First, new mailing address. Second, move your documents and valuables somewhere Rachel doesn't have access to. Third, set up direct deposits only you can touch. Fourth, stop explaining yourself. I nodded slowly. "That last one might be the hardest." "Then start there," she said. "Grace isn't letting people misunderstand you forever. It's knowing when silence is enough." We spent 2 hours reviewing accounts, forms, and options. Martha helped me open a private P.O. box, register my savings at a different branch, and create a small contingency fund. Think of it as your restart, she said. Even if you never use it, you'll breathe easier knowing it exists. After she left, I felt something I hadn't in months control without guilt. That evening, I went through my drawers and gathered every important paper: David's will, my pension, birth certificates, and the title copy I'd requested from the clerk. I packed them neatly into a brown folder and placed it in my car trunk beneath a blanket. Over the next week, I began moving pieces of my life quietly. A few boxes went to storage, a few to donation. I met with a leasing agent named Karen Doyle, who showed me a small apartment 5 miles from Rachel's home. Nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, clean kitchen, sunlight that hit the floor in soft squares. I stood by the window and imagined mornings without correction, evenings without tension. Would you like to fill out the Grain-Nares application? Karen asked. Yes, I said. My voice surprised me with its certainty. That night, I cooked dinner as usual. Rachel and Grant chatted about work while Lucy told a story about her art project. I listened, smiled, and said little. When Rachel glanced at me, I could tell she sensed something different. You okay, Mom? She asked. You've been quiet lately. Just thinking, I said. About what? About space, I replied. She didn't press. Maybe she thought it was a metaphor. Maybe she didn't want to know. Either way, I was grateful for her silence. 2 days later, I called Martha again. It's done, I said. Lease signed, deposits moved, everything in my name. She exhaled in relief. Good. Now don't announce it like a rebellion. Just act like a woman who knows where she belongs. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. The decision had settled something inside me, not anger, not sadness, just clarity. I wasn't running away. I was reclaiming ground I'd given up piece by piece in the name of peace. When I woke the next morning, I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching Rachel leave for work. She waved briefly before getting into her car. I raised my cup in a small, private farewell. She didn't know it yet, but the next chapter had already begun, and for the first time in a long while, it would be written entirely in my hand. The changes began quietly, the way pressure always does, not with a bang, but a slow tightening of the air. Rachel started commenting on small things again. Mom, I asked you not to buy the kids snacks with sugar. Mom, could you please stop reorganizing the towels? Mom, please don't wait up for us. Each sentence carried less warmth and more distance. I didn't argue. I simply noted them in my journal. 12 remarks in 9 days, all about control. It wasn't cruelty. It was something subtler, a quiet rewriting of who belonged where. My belongings began to migrate. A few framed photos disappeared from the hallway, replaced with new family portraits that didn't include me. My tea set moved to a higher cabinet for space. The rocking chair I'd brought from my old house ended up in the garage, wrapped in a sheet. When I asked about it, Rachel said, "We're trying to make the living room less crowded." Grant was kind, though careful. One evening, while we were alone, he said, "You know she's under a lot of stress, right?" "So am I," I replied calmly. "But I don't rearrange people to feel better." He smiled weakly, then changed the subject. I began spending more time out of the house. I walked to the park, visited the library, and started having coffee at a small cafe near my soon-to-be apartment. The owner, a gentleman named Raymond, always saved me a seat by the window. I'd sit there with my notebook, quietly recording events as if they belonged to someone else's story. Then came the day Rachel began moving boxes mine. She said she was sorting the basement. When I checked later, half my things were stacked near the door, labeled with masking tape, old dishes, miscellaneous decor. Donation? I stood there for a long moment, then wrote a new entry in my notebook. 11 boxes relocated without consent. Evidence of transition, unspoken eviction in progress. I didn't confront her. I'd already signed my lease. My exit was a matter of time. Instead, I focused on preparing. I moved my valuables, jewelry, important papers, photographs to the safe in my new apartment. Every time I left the house, I took a small bag of something essential. It became a quiet migration, invisible to everyone but me. One morning, while making breakfast, Rachel glanced at my planner on the counter. "What's this?" she asked. "Just notes," I said. You've been writing a lot lately. It helps me stay clear, I replied. She didn't ask what that meant. The following week, she scheduled a family discussion night. We sat at the table, Rachel, Grant, the kids, and me. She began in her careful, managerial tone. I think we need clearer routines. The house feels unbalanced. Grant nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. Rachel continued. I appreciate everything you've done, Mom, truly. But we have our own rhythm now. I need to feel like this is our home. Her words were reasonable, even kind in structure, but the message was final. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I said, You're right, Rachel. Every home needs space to grow. She looked relieved. So you understand? Completely, I said. Which is why I've already found mine. Grant looked up sharply. What do you mean? I smiled. I've signed a lease for an apartment nearby. It's lovely. Sunny kitchen, quiet neighbors. I'll be moving out next week. Rachel froze. You're moving? Yes, I said. I think it's time we all had some breathing room. She tried to recover her composure. You didn't have to do that, Mom. I know, I said, but I wanted to. The rest of dinner was quiet. Lucy asked if I'd still come for Sunday pancakes. I told her, always, sweetheart. Eli asked if my chair would come back to the living room. I told him it already had a new home waiting. That night, Rachel knocked on my door. I didn't mean to push you away, she said softly. I just wanted to feel like an adult in my own house. I looked at her, my daughter, exhausted and proud, so much like I'd once been. And I want you to feel that way, I said. You've earned it, she nodded, eyes wet. But it feels wrong, you leaving. It's not wrong, I said. It's necessary. The next morning, I went to the leasing office to finalize everything. Karen Doyle smiled when she saw me. Welcome home, Mrs. Mercer, she said. I signed the last form and handed over the deposit. When I walked out, the keys felt warm in my hand. Back at Rachel's house, I began packing the last of my things. Each box I sealed felt lighter than the one before. By evening, I was down to essentials: a week's worth of clothes, my notebook, and the small silver frame that held David's picture. That night, Rachel came into the kitchen, her tone softer than I'd heard in months. I'll help you move, she said. You don't have to. I want to, she insisted. I smiled faintly. Then we'll do it together. We packed in silence the next day. Every sound, the folding of cardboard, the taping of boxes, the creak of old floors, felt like punctuation to a long, complicated sentence finally ending. When the last box was sealed, Rachel turned to me and said quietly, You're really doing this, huh? Yes, I said. And I'll do it kindly. That evening, I sat alone in the half-empty living room, sipping tea from my favorite cup. I looked around the walls I'd once painted, the photos I'd once hung, the laughter that still echoed faintly in the corners. I whispered to the room, Thank you for holding us this long. Outside, the night was still. Somewhere upstairs, I heard Rachel telling the kids a bedtime story. Her voice was soft, steady, confident, the sound of a woman finally standing on her own. And I realized that maybe leaving wasn't a loss at all. It was the proof that I'd done my job well. The morning I left was clear and quiet. No rain, no drama, just sunlight stretching across the kitchen floor like an old friend saying goodbye. I woke early, before the others, and made coffee one last time in the house that had once been mine. The smell filled the air, familiar and grounding. I set 2 cups out of habit, one for me, one for David, then smiled softly at my mistake. Some habits aren't meant to fade, they just learn to live elsewhere. By 8 o'clock, the house was awake. Rachel moved briskly, helping the movers, avoiding my eyes. Grant carried boxes to the car, careful not to ask questions. The children watched from the stairs, half curious, half confused. I'd already explained that Grandma was moving to a new place nearby, a smaller nest, I'd called it, but cozy enough for tea parties. Lucy had cried a little. Eli had hugged me hard and said, Can we visit? I'd promised yes. As the movers loaded the final boxes, Rachel came into the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, trying to sound casual. You don't have to rush, Mom. The movers could come back tomorrow if you need more time. I shook my head. It's better this way. Clean break. She hesitated. You make it sound like something's broken. No, I said gently. Just finished. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she sighed, as if the weight of weeks finally settled. I didn't mean for things to get so cold between us, she said quietly. You didn't do anything wrong, Rachel, I replied. You just wanted to own what you built, and I wanted to hold on to what I lost. Those are different kinds of wanting. She blinked fast, her jaw tightening. I never wanted you to feel like you didn't belong. And yet, I said softly, that's exactly how I feel. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. You could stay, you know, we could start over. I smiled. We already are, just in different houses. Grant appeared in the doorway. Everything's packed, he said. Truck's ready. I nodded, then turned to Rachel. Do you have the spare key? She reached into the drawer, handed it to me automatically, then caught herself. No, wait, those are yours. I held them in my palm for a moment, the metal warm from her touch. Then I placed them on the counter between us. No, honey, I said softly. They're yours. Now. Rachel looked at the keys as if they might vanish. Mom, she began, but the words never formed. I picked up my purse, turned toward the hallway, and paused at the door. You told me to stop acting like this was my house, I said quietly, so I'm doing just that. The silence that followed was sharp but not cruel, just the kind that tells you everything's been said. I opened the door, stepped out into the sunlight, and felt the first real breath I'd taken in months. Outside, the movers were waiting by the truck. I climbed into my car, rolled down the window, and glanced back once. Rachel stood in the doorway, one hand over her mouth, Grant beside her, unsure whether to comfort her or let her be. The children waved from the window. I waved back and smiled, steady and calm. Then I started the engine. The drive to my new apartment took 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the argument. I just watched the road ahead, the rows of houses passing by, families in motion, stories overlapping. When I reached the complex, Karen Doyle met me at the entrance with a friendly smile. Welcome home, Mrs. Mercer, she said. Let me show you where the light switches are. I laughed quietly. I think I can manage. She led me inside anyway, proud of the small touches, the new paint, the polished counters, the scent of fresh air and lemon cleaner. It wasn't large, but it was bright. My boxes sat neatly by the window, waiting. When she left, I stood alone in the middle of the room, hands on my hips. The quiet felt different here, not empty, but open. I unpacked slowly. The first thing I placed was David's photograph on the kitchen shelf. Then, my notebook on the counter. Then, the cup I'd used that morning. One by one, familiar things found new belonging. That evening, I made a simple dinner soup and toast and sat by the window as the sun went down. For the first time in years, I didn't listen for footsteps or voices. Just the hum of the fridge, the whistle of the kettle, and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. Around 8, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. You left your garden gloves. The kids want to bring them over tomorrow. Is that okay? I smiled and typed back. Of course. Tell them I'll have cookies ready. Then I closed my phone, leaned back, and whispered to the room, Welcome home, Evelyn. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and for a brief second I forgot where I was. Then I heard the quiet hum of the fridge, the absence of hurried footsteps, and I remembered I was home. My home. Not borrowed, not shared out of obligation, just mine. The air smelled faintly of coffee and soap, and it felt like breathing after holding it too long. At 9 o'clock sharp, there was a soft knock. When I opened the door, Lucy stood there holding my old garden gloves, her face serious in a way that didn't suit a 9-year-old. Mom said you forgot these, she said, but I think you wanted us to bring them. Behind her stood Rachel, holding a small potted plant lavender, my favorite. She smiled awkwardly. Peace offering? She said. I stepped aside. Come in. Lucy ran to the window, peering out. Grandma, your new place smells like flowers. That's because it's full of them, I said, taking the pot from Rachel. They don't argue with me about where to grow. Rachel laughed quietly. It was the first real sound of ease I'd heard from her in months. We sat at the small kitchen table. The space was warm, but simple: 2 mugs, a sugar bowl, and my notebook in the corner. Rachel looked around slowly, her voice soft. It suits you, she said. Peaceful. It's honest, I said. Everything here knows who owns it. She nodded. For a while, neither of us spoke. Lucy hummed near the window, arranging pebbles on the sill. Finally, Rachel said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I never wanted to. I make you feel like an outsider." "And I never meant to stay so long you felt like one," I replied. "We both held on too tightly, me to the past, you to control. I think we're both learning to let go." Rachel looked down at her hands. "I think I was trying to prove I could do it without you." "You can," I said gently. "But that doesn't mean you should have to alone." She smiled faintly. "You always make things sound so simple." "That's because life isn't complicated," I said. "It's just messy." We talked for an hour about the children, her work, even Grant's new promotion. She told me she missed the sound of me humming while cooking. I told her I missed her, teasing me for seasoning too much. It felt like walking across a bridge we both forgot we built. When they left, she hugged me longer than she meant to. "Will you come for dinner Sunday?" she asked. "If you promise not to scold my lasagna," I said. "Deal." Lucy grinned. "Can we still have pancakes at your place sometimes?" "Always," I said. After they left, I stood at the window watching their car pull away. The lavender pot sat in the sun, its scent filling the kitchen. I opened my notebook and wrote, July 4, first visit. No tension, no ownership, just love rediscovered. The following week, I fell into a new rhythm. Mornings began with coffee and a short walk. Afternoons were for tending to my balcony, garden, mint, basil, and, of course, lavender. Evenings brought small rituals, reading by lamplight, calling Martha, or baking just enough to share with neighbors. One of those neighbors, a retired teacher named George Whitman, introduced himself with a smile and a loaf of bread. "I heard you used to run a school," he said. "So did I. You learn patience faster when 50 teenagers are your audience." We laughed, easy and natural. Friendship, it seemed, found its way even when you weren't looking. Every Sunday, Rachel and the kids visited. They never came empty-handed, sometimes cookies from Lucy, sometimes drawings from Eli, sometimes just stories. Grant came too, quieter now, kinder somehow. He thanked me once, unexpectedly, as he helped fix a loose shelf. "For what?" I asked. "For not making her choose," he said. That night, after they left, I sat on the couch and looked around the apartment, the space that had started as escape and become sanctuary. I realized how peace grows best in boundaries, not in walls. One evening, as the sky turned gold, I took David's photo from the shelf and whispered, "You'd be proud." I finally stopped trying to save everyone. I just learned to stay whole. Outside, children played in the courtyard. Somewhere, a radio played an old tune I used to hum while cleaning. I smiled. The world had kept going, and so had I. 6 months later, life has settled into a rhythm I never knew I needed. My little apartment feels lived in now, curtains drawn just right, the scent of lavender drifting from the balcony, and the steady hum of a world that finally matches my pace. Most mornings, I walk to the cafe where Raymond saves me a seat. He always asks, "How's freedom treating you, Mrs. Mercer?" And I always answer, gently, "Sundays are still family days." Rachel and the kids arrive around noon, bringing laughter and crumbs and stories that fill the quiet spaces of my week. The visits aren't about duty anymore. They're chosen short, warm, and honest. Rachel insists on cooking now, saying she wants to give back. I let her. Sometimes, while she works in my tiny kitchen, I see flashes of the girl she used to be, stubborn, brilliant, and desperate to prove she could stand alone. I understand her better now because I see so much of myself in that need. Last week, Lucy brought over a framed drawing. Our 2 houses connected by a bridge of flowers. "So we can visit any time," she said proudly. I hung it above my table, where sunlight catches it every morning. It reminds me that distance isn't always loss. Sometimes it's love, with room to breathe. Rachel calls me most evenings now, not out of guilt but habit. We talk about small things. Eli's science project, Grant's new clients, the neighbor's new puppy. There's laughter again. We don't mention the day I left, and we don't have to. Some lessons don't need to be repeated. They just need to be remembered. Sometimes, I still drive past the old house. The curtains are different, the yard tidier, the life inside still bustling. But I don't feel sadness. I feel gratitude. It was never the walls that held my family together, it was the love that managed to stay even after I walked away. Now, when people ask if I live alone, I smile. No, I tell them. I live with peace. Thanks for listening. Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.